be able to open it. My stuff's gonna get stuck in my locker, or I'm gonna miss my bus because I can open up my locker. So there will be plenty of time for the kids to practice on their lockers. And I assure them that if their locker gets stuck, they're not gonna get in trouble. They're not gonna miss their bus. We will figure it out. Switching classes can sometimes be a fear. And then of course, making new friends. So they are in an elementary school now that's gonna merge with 2 other elementary schools. So some of the common fears are making new friends. Where am I going to sit at lunch? Who's going to be in my classes? I promise you that your child will be ready for middle school, and you will be ready for them to be here as well. If you have older children that have gone through, hopefully they have shared some of their, maybe fears they had originally that didn't end up being as bad as they thought. I will be having some of our current 8th graders meet with your kids when they come over for the visits this week and next week as well. Okay, so our teams. So in middle school, we have what's called teams, and there's 2 teams in 6th grade, the Egret team and the Heron team. So your child will be assigned a team, and on each team, there's 4 core teachers. So one teacher teaches LA, one teaches social studies, science, and math. The placement of your child on that team will be done, and it's done randomly over the summer. And then students are notified of their team assignment in early August, typically. Hi, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. Are
you interested? The middle school thing?
Okay, and we're managing our Zoom too. You would think that we would know how to do this by now.
Yeah, I mean.
I'm going to talk to you about the grading system because it is a little bit different from what you're used to at elementary school. Your elementary school report card is a standards-based report card. So you have lots and lots of standards that the kids receive marks on based on whether or not they've met the standard, exceeded the standard, or are progressing towards the standard. The middle school is moving towards a mastery-based grading system. So there's going to be elements of standards-based grading with that and elements of traditional grading. So what is going to be the same is that your students are going to continue to receive letter grades for each of their core subjects. So they can earn an A, B, C, D, E, not E, A, B, C, D, or F in their classes. But we're really working to make sure that that grade reflects their mastery of the content. So when we all went to school, a lot of things go into grades. And they sometimes inflate grades and they sometimes deflate grades artificially. So we have found over the years, and there's lots of research out there, that a grade, when it's been inflated or deflated based on things like participation in class, how often do you raise your hand? Well, if you're an introverted kid and your grade is being negatively impacted because you don't like to raise your hand and talk, that's not necessarily a fair reflection then on how you are as a student and how much content you have learned in that class. So the grades are going to be a reflection of mastery of content, which means tests, quizzes, projects, assessments, those sorts of things. There's going to be a separate indicators for things like participation, homework completion, things like that that aren't necessarily being graded for accuracy and mastery, but that are important in the learning process. And so we're going to give feedback to kids about those, because those are the skills, we call them habits of work, or the how rubric. Those are the skills that we want kids to learn in middle school, because those are the skills that are going to help them to be successful as more independent learners in high school and beyond. They need to learn the importance of studying for quizzes and engaging in content, but it doesn't need to impact their grade. So you're going to see a normal report card that you all are used to, A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's, based on their level of mastery of those skills. But then you're also going to have feedback in Power School, which is a tool that we'll talk a lot about tonight, about their habits of work and how they are progressing and how they are doing with those other things like I mentioned, work completion and participation. That has been a goal of this school. We've been working on it even through COVID to make that transition. So this is actually the first time that we're presenting it in this way to our incoming parents, and we've had some teachers piloting that how rubric this year, and we're going to be rolling it out school-wide next year. So some Some of our kids are familiar with it, some of them are not yet. Okay, another unique thing, or different from elementary school at least, is our schedule. A lot of kids get nervous, as Ms. Dolce mentioned, about the schedule and being confused with where to go and when to go. We have a 6-period day here. A, B, C, D, E, and F are our blocks. 4 of those 4 classes, those would be on this screen, they'd be the ones in white for 6th grade. They have been A period, C period, D period, and F period are the 4 core classes. So kids will either have language arts, science, social studies, or math during those 4 blocks within their team. The B and the E blocks alternate by odd days and even days in our schedule. So every other day, like on B135, students might have PE every other day, B135. Their B246 might be their world language rotation, where they're going to take a trimester of Spanish, Latin, and French. You'll hear a little bit more about that. It might be an academic support class. We have a lot of interventions and supports for regular education students and special education students during those every other day classes. That's where that support happens. That's when chorus, band, orchestra meets. And I think that's all of them. Okay, so that schedule is daily core classes every other day for the non-core. This year, not 100% sure it will look like that next year, but you notice there's D and then lunch and then D. So this year our 6th graders have the split lunch wave. We run 3 lunch waves, an 8th grade lunch, a 6th grade lunch, and then a 7th grade lunch is our schedule this year. It could be that they have the split lunch again, or it could be that they'll eat first or last, but they will eat together in this space as 6th graders. They do not have lunch with the other students in other grades, if that was a question. They have 6th grade lunch, all 6th graders from all schools together, and they have the ability when they come in to sit at any table, generally speaking, unless there's concerns, to sit wherever they want with whoever they want. So if they're not placed on the team with one of their close friends, there's really a couple of places during the day. I should speak to that while I have the schedule up. Lunch is definitely placed. They're all here. So all the kids from all 3 elementary schools will be here together. They can find all their friends if they're not on the same team or even in the same classes. The other classes, the every other day classes, are also cross-teamed. So they may have PE with kids from the other team. They may have their world language rotation with kids from the other team. So it's just the core classes that are like team here, and then the non-core are mixed randomly across the grade. So still lots of opportunity. If they have a little disappointment that they're not with their best friend on their team, they will definitely still see them throughout the school day. Okay.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the elective classes that we have. So every student is required to take PE, or physical education. That is one of those classes that meets every other day. So if their UA period is B and E, it would be during one of those times. They are required to change. We do have locker rooms. And then there's tons of activities that we offer in the PE program. We have 2 gyms. We have the field house, and then we have our gym that they utilize. We have the field out in our back, which is really the front entrance, but you get what I mean. And then we have Stenger Park. So they do hikes over there. They do a lot of activities. So they get a lot of opportunity to try different things during PE. So our unified arts, you can think of those as like our electives. Those are also required. So the 3 unified arts for grade 6 are art, technology, education, and general music. So again, those meet every other day per trimester. So we have 3 trimesters at Clark Lane Middle School. So 1 trimester your child will have art, 1 trimester tech ed, and then 1 trimester general music. So they rotate through those. And then the world language. So again, that is required. So the grade 6 students have the opportunity to try out all 3 of our languages. So again, they will have 1 each trimester. So they will get a trimester of Spanish, then Latin, and then French. And then at the end of the grade 6 year, they get to select which one they want to pursue for 7th and 8th grade. Upon successful completion of that language in 8th grade, they will then basically qualify for the level 1 of that specific language. So let's say they took French all, for grade 6 and grade 7 and 8, they chose French and they successfully completed it, they would have the opportunity to start Waterford High School taking French 2. So that's kind of cool. The kids get excited that they get to start at a higher level in high school, should they choose to. Our music ensembles, so for your students right now, students who are currently in an ensemble will be automatically scheduled into that ensemble for grade 6. The music ensemble, again, they meet every other day for the whole year. And the opportunities there are band, orchestra, and chorus.
They didn't give me a lot of slides. I think they don't trust me. So before I get to my slide, I'll tell you a funny story that came out of COVID. So we all worked very hard during the worst part of the pandemic. There was a lot of calling home and quarantining kids. So at the beginning of last year, the hybrid year, we would call parents and tell them that their students were quarantined for 14 days. For some parents, that was really, really traumatic. Because you're working and like principal was calling you and saying, get around the kids. You know, we were quarantining contacts, if you follow it. At the beginning, it's contacts. How many people actually work on the positive? So we had this script that was like it was, and it was really long, elaborate script, and then you had to break it into them. That was 14 days of quarantine. And I was reading the script to this one dad, and I went through the whole thing. And I took a deep breath. I told him he was quarantined for 14 days. And he didn't even miss a beat. He said, "I'm just glad he's not in trouble." And I was like, "Oh." So it's interesting being a principal in the middle school. It has certainly been over the last 2 years. And we are sort of getting back to normal. So we just converted the stage back from an eating area to a stage. So the other day I got on the mic and I said to the kids, "Hey, tomorrow we're not going to be able to eat on the stage anymore because they've been eating on the stage for over a year to keep it separate." And the kids said, "Well, why do you need to do that?" I said, "We need our stage back." And he said, "Well, why do we need a stage?" And I said, "Well, we need a stage because we're supposed to have plays." So I had to actually make a less of what we use a stage. So it was really interesting. The kids' minds right now are still a little bit lacking, and we're kind of making up for lost time. So we've converted over, and they seem to enjoy this just fine. And we're making a lot of progress. This room will look a little different next year. It'll mostly be occupied by these long 12ers, but we'll also have these red ones. And so we did learn that a little more of a cafe style is better for the students than something too regimented. So we did learn some stuff about this space. After school activities. So we were able to bring back after school activities this year. And we're really happy that we have so many students using our late buses Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to join all the clubs that you see there, student council, drama club. We have a lot of connections programs. You can meet them yourself. Next year, we'll have Rubik's Cube contests again. We hosted one 2 years ago or 3 years ago. We have coding club. We have a whole group of kids who run the news in the morning with green screen and they use very high-tech cameras and software. You can see some of the other clubs. We also have athletic teams. You can see written there. And really have a lot of new kids who joined volleyball and swimming in the last couple of years. So it's really great. Superintendent supported us expanding athletics. And then, you know, there's also just some intramural clubs and athletics that we, after school, kids get to do things with their friends. I highly encourage you, your child to do after school activities. We have the transportation in place. There's a lot to choose from, and it gets them very quickly acclimated to the school and learning other students who they are, and then they built a lot of confidence. So, and at the end of the day, Mrs. Moore and I are usually there at the late buses, and we get to know a lot more kids. So it's really great to encourage them. Those clubs will start to be listed on morning announcements, probably September, and they'll go up on the website. And it's also a great way to meet other students from other grades, which breaks down a little bit of that feeling that the other grades are intimidating. And they also meet future teachers that they have too. So it's a really nice way to get them more acclimated to Clark.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the different ways that we support students here at Clark Lane. The first thing that I know makes a lot of kids and parents probably nervous is that this is a much bigger school than coming from an elementary school. We have about 580-ish students that attend here across the 3 grades. So there's a lot of kids, there's a lot of teachers, it's a bigger building, all of that. We work really hard as a school to build community. The after school activities and those sorts of things are a great way to do that. But we also do a lot as teachers with students to build common expectations, because that's the first thing that will make kids feel safe, is knowing that everybody else is kind of doing the same thing when they're here. So we have what's called our PBIS, our Pride team. And we really started this work about 5 years ago, pre-COVID. And it rolled out with really defining clear expectations for every area of this building. Over there on the wall is our matrix. And I know that that's, we don't expect anybody to be able to read that from where they are, but we spend a lot of time working with kids on teaching those expectations. What does it look like to behave in this space? What do we expect of everyone here so that this is a safe and comfortable place? There's a lot of kids and it gets really loud, but it still needs to be safe and comfortable for kids. We're working on revising those expectations right now because we've learned a lot over COVID. Some things that we have done over the past few years, we're going to keep because they've worked well. Other things we're shifting back, and we have to kind of retrain. As Jim mentioned, our kids don't always know exactly what we are expecting of them now that they're kind of back with everyone else in large groups and large settings. How do you walk in the hallway when there's 500 kids walking in the hallway at the same time? It's about keeping your hands to yourself and walking on the right. Notice the tape is still there from COVID again. That helps us make kids feel safe and comfortable. So our motto, we have it divided into how to show pride in your behavior, pride in your learning, and pride in your community. That's the framework that we use to talk to kids about our expectations. And I mentioned that we spend a lot of time doing lessons. We're going to start the year with those lessons, and then we reinforce them as we see things pop up that we need to address. I think Mr. Sachs wants to talk.
Джакузи тоже пойдет? Или просто бантик?
One, you'll notice some posters up here that say own your. So that's another sort of side theme.
Я могу температуру убавить.
Is we've noticed a lot of students over the last 2 years, when approached about behaviors, automatically say it wasn't me or somebody else.
Они говорят, что expect в школе как бы не слышно.
Only behaviors or corrective behaviors, you will have less problems at the high school. It's kind of a philosophy. Previously being a high school administrator is to fix issues in the middle school for all of you before kids feel so, able to do inappropriate things that they take that behavior to the high school. So when we correct students on their behaviors, we're going to call you, not all the time, but if they're serious enough, or to get paperwork from us. And if you want to call us, obviously you can call us, we can discuss it. But one thing you need to know about the philosophy is you want to follow the behaviors, they will get some kind of discipline, and then we obviously don't want their behavior to repeat. So we're going to have a conversation with every student. And I just want you to be aware that you'll start seeing that on your behaviors. You'll see that in the handbook, you'll see that matrix in the handbook, you'll see that slogan, pride in our behavior, learning community also in their handbook. So that's a conversation point with your students. So, sometimes the slogans seem a little corny, but I will tell you that when I point to something on my matrix or say to a student, hey, what is our slogan? Or, hey, have you seen the posters all over the school? And the kids will say, yeah, maybe I did. So those things are almost like psychological advertising to get kids to just understand it. So we're putting a lot of work into that. And when we come back in the fall, we'll actually take small groups, bring to every part of the school and teach them how to use the bathroom properly in terms of, reporting vandalism, doing what you have to do, washing your hands, being respectful, how to properly use a cafeteria. We'll actually walk them out to the buses the first day or two of school and review bus behavior. And when we did that in the 2019-2020 school year, we saw a real decrease in behaviors because we directly taught them the expectations. So the PBI system does work, but we have to revamp it because we literally put it on hold, kids went home, and then the hybrid unit was happening for kids. So now we're sort of anticipating a full swing back to the regular school next year. We're going to go right back into a revised version of PBI. So thank you for your support.
Okay, so how else can you support students? Academic support. We use the RTI model, which is response to intervention, that every school uses. It really breaks support down into tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is something that is available to all students in all classrooms. That is really what we expect as good teaching. If a kid is struggling in your classroom, what are you doing as a teacher to support them? Are you pulling them aside? Are you using a different strategy? Are you reteaching that in a small group? All of those things that you would expect from good teaching are tier 1 interventions. Sometimes we have to be really specific and try a really specific strategy with a kid in tier 1 to see if that works to help if they're having trouble. If not, we move them through the process to tier 2 or tier 3. And what that would look like is support during those every other day times for kids. So additional support, additional time with an adult. That could be in a tier 2 model, it could be their same classroom teacher. So if a kid is struggling in math, they could be assigned to a math academy every other day for a trimester. It could be with their math teacher or the other math teacher in the grade. And it's meant to be temporary, see if that helps. And again, we could then move on. We also have tier 3 support. That's with our math interventionist. That's a teacher whose sole job it is to provide math intervention. So it's a little bit more intense. The frequency stays the same. We work on that every other day model, but it's a little bit more intense, targeted intervention where you're really looking at where the weak area is and addressing it. We have a similar model through our literacy. So with reading and writing as well, we have lots of screening tools that our literacy interventionists would use with kids to try to pinpoint where the breakdown is. And again, first we try things in tier 1 and then we would bump them up. So, and then in addition to that, we have students who are on IEPs. If you have a student on an IEP, they receive, they will have what's called skills classes. Those are in the every other day rotation, and those are the direct instruction that are intended to meet the goals and objectives that are in their IEP. So those classes, there was a question in the chat is when do those take place? So those meet in our every other day rotation, and depending if they need 1 support class or 2, sometimes kids, whether they're regular ed or special education in that tiered model or on IEP, they might need math support and literacy support. So they might have 2 classes. Those would be in place of the blocks in the schedule where there is a music ensemble and or the world language rotation. So that is not something that every student takes if they need an academic intervention first. We would do that, and then we would add the chorus, band, orchestra, or the world language rotations back in. So that's where we find some flexibility in our schedule to provide those interventions. I think it's really important to mention that we don't do any intervention or special education support through pullout of regular core classes. We want all kids to be in their core classes. If we need to provide support, we try to do push-in. So we might have speech and language therapists pushing in. We offer co-taught mathematics classes. So if kids need additional support in math, we either have a paraprofessional or a special education teacher who go in and provide that support in the regular math class. And then we have these other times in the day where we can provide some additional direct instruction.
So also we work on
Okay, and then lastly, how do we support students' social and emotional growth? And Ms. Dolce is going to talk a little bit more about that, but this is where we do things. We do team assemblies. We will often pull a team together either in this space or in the back of the library and go over things that teachers might be seeing kind of across their 4 classes or in their hallway area. We will call team assemblies if we see things across the school rather than whole school assemblies, because those are just too large to really be effective. We utilize the SPIS system, which is where we kind of track major and minor behavioral infractions. So we look at that data on a regular basis, and we look for kids that might be having trouble in multiple classes. So we can maybe pull together and say, well, what's going on? Because sometimes when your child has 6 different teachers throughout the day and they start to struggle, it might take a while before the pattern emerges or before it's clear that there's trouble. So we use some documentation internally to try to find kids that are struggling a little bit quicker. The teams also meet, those 4 core teachers meet every other day to talk through things that they might be seeing in their respective classrooms with regards to individual students. So we try to catch kids early if they're starting to struggle or feel uneasy about things. We have a variety of ways that students can report to us. We go over that at the beginning of the year. That's always changing based on the technology, but we have anonymous reporting. I have kids that email me. I tell them to email me if they're struggling. They don't want to always come down and talk to us in our office. They feel like they're a snitch, and we don't like that word, and we don't use that word, but that's how kids sometimes feel. But there's a lot of ways that they can let us know things that are going on that are concerning, whether it's in-school things or a lot of times it's out-of-school things, things that they hear their friends thinking about or talking about or doing. Sometimes on social media, you heard Dan say that over and over again. So that's a way that we find out from kids, that anonymous reporting. We do a lot with whole school SEL. That's always changing, and it's changing now again as we come out of COVID. That RTI system that I talked about with moving kids from tier 1 to tier 2 to tier 3, we do that for behavioral support and counseling. We start with sometimes check-ins with kids, and then we increase if a kid needs to see either their school counselor or a school psychologist or a school social worker more regularly. We can do that through both regular education and special education. And we have a lot of mental health and social emotional support for kids. So not only do we have 1 school counselor for each grade. If we were unavailable for a crisis, there would be 2 other school counselors ready to jump in. We have 2 school psychologists here at the building, and we have a school social worker. We also have our school-based health program here, which is run through UCFS. That's become a wonderful resource. They just started this year, and it's been building a lot of momentum with kids. So that's a way for kids to get outside counseling during the school day or here at school. So we'll be sending out some communications to you. The best thing about that is if you can enroll your child up front, get all the paperwork done. If there is either a social, emotional, or mental health issue or a medical issue, like they need a vaccine or the blood test that you need for 7th grade that they miss frequently, they can get that done right here with your permission. They would never do it without your permission, but it just expedites the process. They can do things like quick strep throat culture. So if a kid is seen by the nurse and they think it might be strep, they could do that here, so you don't have to schedule an appointment with your pediatrician. They do flu shot clinics. They'll be running those. So they've just become a really wonderful resource. We probably have over a dozen students now who are seeing some sort of mental health support through UCFS, and they can take probably twice that many. So we're really working to build that program. It's a great community resource for us. All right, I'm going to let Ms. Dolce know.
Okay, so the role of the school counselor. So I talked a little bit about this. So in elementary school, your students don't have a school counselor. So I think it's important as you start middle school to kind of understand, like, what is my role? What can I offer? How can I help your child? So I am available to every single 6th grade student. By the end of the 6th grade year, I will have met individually with every single grade 6 student to get to know them a little bit, find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, what's going really well for them, what's not going so great. I'm also in the classroom on a regular basis. So we have a school counseling curriculum, and at least once a month, I will be in the classroom talking about friendship, talking about what does it mean to be a middle school student, what is power school, how do I manage my time, how do I deal with stress, what is anxiety. So I will be in there on a regular basis. I'm in the hallways. The first couple of weeks of school, I will be in the hallway nonstop. So I am readily available to help. You can think of me as like an additional support person. If your child's like having a really tough day, they're anxious, they're sad, my door is always open. They can come and talk with me, especially with grade 5 and 6. I do a lot of transition stuff. So it's very normal for your child to be feeling anxious, to be worried, to be nervous, maybe you don't want to go to school. So that transition piece, I offer a lot of check-ins. So if your child needs a temporarily, hey, check in with him or her, once a week, twice a week, every couple of weeks or whatever, I can easily offer that. And a lot of students will come down, especially the first couple of weeks of school, saying, I just want to check in. we can talk, or it'll just be a space for them to kind of breathe and chill out, regroup, and go back to class. So we have a curriculum, I do the check-ins, I do short-term counseling, so sometimes, you know, maybe it's a situational thing and something came out in the family or in school, and, you know, you suggest or recommend that I check in with your child for a temporary basis, I can offer that. In grade 6, I have sign-ups for lunch groups, so sometimes kids want to come down and have lunch, so they can sign up and have lunch with me once a week. I offer that throughout the whole school year, so sometimes we'll meet in my office, we'll meet in the courtyard. It's kind of just an opportunity for kids to get together with some of their friends with me and have lunch. So I'm available for crisis, so like if something drastic happens, you need me to check in with your child, I'm available for that. I'm kind of like the liaison, so to speak, between the child and the teacher, between you and the teacher. So if something's happening in the classroom and you kind of maybe want a second opinion on it, I'm available. I meet with the teams at least once a week, and I check in with them to see how students are doing. I will be meeting with all the grade 5 teachers by the end of the school year. Check in about all of your students and to hear all the great things about them and how I can help them be successful here. So it's really just an additional resource for you and for your child.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pelchin. So I'm going to tell you, ask you or tell you some ways that you can support your middle schooler. So we create a really nice agenda every summer. And so there'll be an agenda with a calendar, all the rules of the school, all the matrices such as that, the read to retake policy, the habit of learn policy. So that handbook will have really a lot of stuff in it, but also there's a great calendar in there for students to keep track of their work on a daily basis. So I'd strongly suggest you at least say to your child, hey, we take out your agenda, tell where you need to be today when you're talking about getting back to the homework. Looking at Power School and maybe Google Classroom once a week would be probably really smart. You know, doing your best to help kids with student conflict, which is a normal thing in middle school. But we're also here for both advice and to hear how you dealt with it and to follow up for you. So, and vice versa. So if we have a conflict here and you hear about it, we want you to know about it. You can follow up on your end, etc. We want it to be a team effort, but conflict is sort of normal in middle school. They're growing really fast and they're growing physically, they're growing mentally, and they come in as children and they leave as ready to go to high school. So it's really interesting 3 years. And there is some conflict in there, but we're here to help you with it. Definitely minimize access to electronic social media. So we are a one-to-one school and we have some systems in place to track that right in the classroom. So if a student strays off in a classroom, teacher will be alerted and they'll correct it, and that's been working really well. So we're able to correct students in school, but you know, kids are pretty smart, so they'll do some social media stuff without you knowing. And you know, maybe once a week, a parent will say, I had no idea you had that now. So definitely try to monitor that, especially 6th and 7th. 8th, they get a little bit more mature about it, and it doesn't cause as much problems, but definitely watch it. So we have a cell phone policy that says off and away during the day. So we would like students to shut off their cell phones, put them in either their locker or their backpack. Put it away during the day. They can take it out as soon as the bell rings at the end of the day, and they can also have it after school with them. Advocating for yourself, that simply means a student comes home and says, Mom, Dad, I don't think this teacher was fair with this grade, or I am struggling in this, or I don't know how to sign up for a club. You send them back to school and say, hey, you know, did you use a support person? Did you go to your counselor? Did you go to the principal? Did you go to the teacher and ask them to fix some of those problems? We want you to send them back and encourage them to self-advocate, because it definitely helps them with their maturity and confidence. You know, obviously the last thing is that mistakes are okay. We try to emphasize that with students to own your behavior. Mistakes happen, and we will fix it together. Okay. Sure. Yeah, no problem.
want them to do that. It allows them to take risks and be okay with taking risks, and know that even if you fail, you're gonna be okay. When that does happen. And then the advocating, that is a huge one throughout our lives, even as adults. And so it's something that I recommend, like if your child comes home and says, you know, this happened with a friend, or this happened with my teacher, and you're not really sure how to address it, you can always offer, like, why don't you go talk to Mrs. Dolce? And I can tell them to say, right, so is this something that I can model, how we have a conversation with the teacher or the friend, or is this something that requires?
Okay, no, good points. So how to reach us? So obviously you could call us and ask for any of us, or also leave messages for teachers. You can find us all on the CLMS website. You can look at the teacher pages. You can email us. You can look at the Students Power School or Google Classroom. There's parent-teacher conferences twice a year. The school counselors have a great website. And obviously the parent student handbook is super helpful. So we are now a one-to-one school district. So when Mrs. Moore mentioned that matrix over there for behavior and how we're changing it, I think the original one said no devices, and then we ended up handing everybody devices. So we had to make some adjustments ourselves. So if students have a school-issued device, that's going to be required next year for the entire district, because honestly, that helps us with a whole bunch of things: monitoring, standardized testing, and making sure that platforms work with all of our applications and software. If people have a variety of different devices, we just run into a lot of problems, and those problems equal lost learning time. So we would ask you to please make sure that you have your child has a school device coming in next year, and we'll email you and tell you all about that. And there'll be insurance offered next year. So, you know, the first couple of years were, the first year obviously was emergency. Last year was sort of half your own device, half the schools. This year was mostly the school's device. And I feel like next year is the fine tuning year where we're offering the insurance and everybody's almost on the same page. So that's probably where it would be by now anyway, because we started talking about it in 2019. Google Classroom is still a primary tool that teachers use to organize, and it's really helpful when students are out. They can go on, they can see all the assignments for that day, and they can actually do the assignments at the end of it. So that's a really great, you know, software piece. It's also good in case we ever have to not be at school for some reason or another. Teachers still could use that to do virtual learning. I don't anticipate that, but it's nice to know that it's there. We will review acceptable use of computers. We also have a big advertising thing about not closing these on pencils and not running with them, and a whole bunch of things that will decrease breakage. And they are monitored and managed by one of the public schools IT. So I do get alerts when kids do things they shouldn't do on their computers, or even say statements that are dangerous. And so you should feel good that that monitoring, although it feels like it's an invasion of privacy, there's still little kids and we're kind of acting as you might at home, looking over your child's shoulder saying, hey, wait, you should be doing that on the computer. So we're reasonable about telling them to knock it off as a one level and shutting off the device as another level, or contacting you or giving you detention. But we don't want kids to cause danger or distraction on computers. And I think you would all agree with that.
I'll just add one little thing to the monitoring. So I know it sounds like we're monitoring for kids kind of going and doing inappropriate things, searching inappropriate things. And that is a piece of it, but there's another piece of it where the software scans the files that kids write. And so we are alerted when kids might write something that indicates either themselves or a friend is at risk for self-harm, or somebody in their family might be, those sorts of things. And those are really powerful, important messages that we are alerted to, because kids, again, at this age, they don't always know how to ask for help. They don't know when they should ask for help. And so sometimes if they're emailing back and forth, or if they write something in class that's a little darker and a little concerning, it prompts a conversation. Sometimes it's just the creative writing aspect, but sometimes it is a little bit more, and it allows Ms. Dolce to kind of dig a little deeper, and you were always kind of looped in if something like that were to happen. So it serves kind of two purposes, to keep them safe regardless. Okay, my last slide is around the health room. So they always want us to go over this information. It's really important that you understand that all medication, this is the same at every school, all medication needs to go through the nurse's office, and that includes over-the-counter medication. And as kids get older, you might be inclined to trust them a little more, to give them a few Advil to carry in their backpacks, take it if they get a headache or cramps or whatever it might be, but really that stuff should be going through the nurse's office. Kids take out pills, we don't know what they are, they give them, we have kids giving vitamins to each other, like that's all not good, because you just never know, we talk to kids, you just never know how somebody else might react. So please make sure that all medications go through the nurse's office. There are some things around cough drops, but she'll send that out usually pre-winter season next year. The other important thing to note is when your child starts 7th grade, state mandated updates to vaccinations have to happen before they can start 7th grade. So their physical that they might have anytime after July 1st of this year is going to make them eligible to start 7th grade in time. It's that 1 year prior to the start of 7th grade. So please be aware when you schedule that appointment to make sure you get that blue form and all their vaccinations. All the pediatricians know what they need. It's listed up there, but just make sure you have that, send it in, and then you won't be bothered by the nurse and myself starting at this time of year with kind of weekly emails about getting those physical forms in, because we don't want to see kids not able to start school or receive the summer communications, because we have to hold all that until we have all the paperwork. So just be mindful of that. The nurse will send home stuff in the summer around screenings. And then I think the last thing is kind of a sign of the times with a lot of kids having phones. If they're sitting in a classroom, they don't feel well, they're tempted to take it out, text or call their parents to go home. They'll go to the bathroom and they'll do that. And all of a sudden a parent will show up in the office to pick up a kid. And we really ask that that not happen. If someone is not feeling well in the building, they should go to the nurse. The nurse should call you to come and get them if they need to be dismissed. So just be mindful, if you ever get a call from your kid in the bathroom here at Clark Lane, alert an adult and we can kind of intervene and figure out what's going on. Okay. So,
all of the elementary school visits. So they will be coming to Clark Lane. They will meet us in the back of the library. I will be there. Mrs. Moore will be there. Mr. Sachs will be there. Some of our 8th grade students will be there. So they will kind of get an abbreviated version of what we just discussed. They will have some time for question and answer, but the 8th grade students, they will get a tour. They'll meet some of the teachers, and they will do a trivia game with our grade 8 students. In addition to that, before school starts, it'll be the week before, we don't have the date yet, but the week before school starts, we will have orientation. It's by team. So your student will come here, depending upon which team will dictate which day and time. They'll get their schedule. They meet with us in the field house. They'll be broken down into small groups. They will be able to try out their locker. They'll get their locker assignment. They'll be able to get another tour. They will meet with myself again. Some of the teachers may be here. We typically have our current 7th graders, rising 8th graders for next year come to help us out as well. So there's a lot of opportunity for them to get familiar with Clark Lane, for them to meet a teacher, to see their classroom. We go through the schedule, so they will get a grid and they will map out exactly where they need to go the first day. So that I think helps a lot. First day of school is Wednesday, August 31st, I believe. And then how to contact us. So the next slide has our information. To contact any teacher by email, the first initial of their first name followed by last name and then waterfordschools.org. This presentation will be on the website. And then what do we do? Sure. We're going to take some time for questions right now. I'll start with 2 questions while you're gathering your thoughts here in the audience. I will do the 2 questions that have popped in the chat. If there's anybody else on Zoom, if you have a question, go ahead and pop it in there. The first question is about when to sign up for extracurriculars. So those are done. Those are all announced via our morning announcements. We have a really cool morning announcement production. It's student-led, student-run. They do morning news every day and teachers load in their announcements. So if a club is getting ready to start,
That will be announced on those morning announcements every day. There's a link on our website for parents. You could watch the morning announcements every day if you want, so that you can know what's going on. They also put like little posters and flyers all around the building. So depending on the teacher, it's usually a sign up kind of near their classroom, so they would just go and sign up for that club. If they're going to do a sport, the procedure is a little bit more complicated because that you have to register through a site called Family ID. That would all be sent home through the athletic department, how to do that, because they need to have updated physicals, and then there's some information and quizzes that parents have to take around things like cardiac and concussions and stuff like that. So the process is a little more complex if they're going to do a sport like cross country or soccer in the fall, wrestling, basketball in the winter, and track in the spring, and swimming in the winter. Okay, those are the sports that would have a little bit of a more complicated sign-up process. The other question was around the math program here and the accelerated math versus regular math. So we are going to be offering an accelerated math program next year. That will, the kids to enter that program will be determined by 5th grade teachers. What they will do is they will look at standardized testing scores that might include SBAC. I know that the SBAC over the past few years, we didn't even take it years ago. Last year was COVID, and this year we may not have until the middle of the summer. So it might include SBAC. It will include looking at their math test performance, as well as their level of mastery of 5th grade content and their ability to learn and master that content fairly quickly, fairly confidently, and to take on that challenge. So that class is really a class that would accelerate them for the potential to take algebra in 8th grade, which allows for some other opportunities at high school. I want to assure you though that because of COVID, we haven't actually offered the accelerated math program the last 2 years, because we didn't feel that we could properly identify kids out of 5th grade for that level of math. So what we've been doing is we've been running these pathway programs. So there's other opportunities throughout middle school. The high school has looked at their math programs to provide other opportunities, because not every kid develops at the same rate. So if your child isn't ready for accelerated math in grade 6, then that's okay. There's going to be an opportunity if they kind of develop late and they have a passion for math and they're interested in it, they can jump on that path a little bit later through our pathways program. So that would be something to talk to their math teacher about next year, their current math teacher, Ms. Dolce, myself. I was a former math teacher. It is an area that I know a lot about and am invested in here. So other questions in the room, I'll be sure to repeat them for the folks online. Any questions here? Any other questions online, Zoomers? Yes. Okay, great questions. Another question about clarifying the times and days of after-school activities. So our after-school, our general clubs all run on Mondays, Tuesdays, or Wednesdays. Our school day ends at 2:35, so we always say 2:40 to 3:40 is the after-school activities window. At 3:40, our late buses start to arrive. We have 4 late buses. They go to various parts of town. We help kids figure out what late bus to go on. It gets them close to their home and their normal stop, but maybe not exactly, because there's only 4 and usually have like 12 buses at least. Again, each club starts at a different time. It's kind of dependent on the teacher's schedule, but what they do is they advertise. So like Nature Walks was a club that a teacher did, and she did every Monday and advertised her dates. Every Monday through the fall, then she picked up and did Mondays in the spring. Different clubs will meet on different days. So that's part of that morning news announcement. Will tell you what days. The clubs tend to meet once a week, once every other week. The sports teams will probably be more like daily. That's a little bit more of a commitment, and those might go later than the late buses. So clubs can always be, they will always end in time for a late bus. The sports teams would go longer. I also want to mention extra help, after school extra help. So every teacher here stays after school one of those 3 days, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, and they advertise that date. So their language arts teacher might be on Monday, their math teacher on Tuesday, their social studies and science teachers may share Wednesday. So there's always a place for kids to stay, and we encourage kids to stay. This is part of advocating for themselves. If they're struggling, if they struggle with an assignment, if they were absent and they need to make something up, we encourage them to, when is your teacher staying? Stay after with them this week. That would go from 2:40 to 3:40, and then they would take the late bus home. I feel like I was going to say something else, but I just lost my thought. So extra help after school is a really great resource for kids, and they don't have to, if they go to a math teacher, they don't have to do math homework. They can just stay there and work on other homework if they want to kind of get it done, button it up, and then go home and they're kind of done for the day. Okay.
Athletics generally go longer, so those practices may end after the late buses, and certainly any kind of competitions, especially if they're away, would be after. But those buses would come back here for you to pick them up. So athletics have their own set of after-school requirements, but it's a great question. Sure. So those actually are in 8th grade. So there's electives in 8th grade. There's advanced ceramics, advanced drawing, advanced painting, advanced murals. Those are offered in 8th grade. There's also an advanced culinary. So we are always working on, tweaking the electives, which we started about 5 years ago at the school. So we have a really nice electives program that'll be sort of back to where it was 2 years ago this coming year. And your kids will know about that. You're welcome.
The art teacher also runs an art club, which is more voluntary. Yes, question about opportunities for kids to start new clubs. Absolutely, we talk to kids about that at the beginning of the year. If there's something that you're interested in, we help them to advocate to find an adult who might be interested in that, and if they struggle with that, then we help them with that. But yeah, we have kids that try to start clubs every year. We had a kid started Hogwarts Club. We had a tech deck, which are those little like skateboard things, and they built like
Plushie.
We have a plushie club where they make these really soft, cute little stuffed animal things. So whatever they might be interested in. Other questions? There's a question about who the teachers are on each team. So that is something that will be communicated in the summer letters when those decisions are finalized. There are always staffing changes between now and the start of the year. As you may or may not know, if you paid attention to the budget, there were some cuts at the high school, and that is impacting some staffing here. So there are some teachers moving around here at the middle school. So those decisions are not finalized yet, but that will be all included in your summer communication. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, that's a really good question. The question was, what time does the school day begin? Homeroom starts at 7:50. We want all kids in their homeroom at 7:50. So that means if you're driving them, please plan to have them here by 7:45, not 7:50, because they can't walk from your door to their classroom in 10 seconds or less. So please, the school day starts at 7:50. We want them here. We don't like them. It is hard for kids when they come in and an activity or a class or something has already started. It contributes to their feelings of anxiety around the school day. So obviously the buses get them here to the best of their ability on time. That happens most of the time. And then if you're driving them, the drop off is here. They come in here to wait if they get here before 7:45, and then we release them up to their classes. So you can drop them off anytime from 7:15 on. So if you need to get to work, you can drop them off. Officer Lane is here to greet them, open the door for them, let them in. They can eat breakfast. Right? Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, seeing no more questions. I want to mention one thing about breakfast. It does look like the federal government is suspending that free breakfast and lunch program as of July 1st. So understand that you may want to build up a little account in our cafeteria, because there won't be that just get off the bus and grab whatever you want. But that may change, you never know. So that'll be something we'll send out a notification on. That's actually quite nice. Any other questions? Okay, so we really appreciate you coming out tonight and appreciate the people on Zoom. We're excited to have your students visit the school and excited for orientation in the summer. Please reach out to us. We'll put this on Ms. Dolce's school counseling website. And if you have any other questions that pop into your head afterwards, we try to get back to you within a day. And if you can also email us too. So thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.